I didn't get home until 11:25 last night. I'm gonna take my daughter to the doctor because she said her stomach was hurting real bad. We thought she was having contractions, so it's scary, and I was, they're just like, no, because your baby's taking too much and you're stretching more. So we waited there from about 7:30. Yeah, and then the test, and I told her, you're fine.
Morning, Post. Oh. See, sitting here. Oh, and we're early. That's interesting. Okay. There were issues with Blackboard yesterday in SPC. So if you didn't get your narrative final turned in, you have till today, and I won't count it late. Okay? But you got to get it turned in. All right? Because today we're talking about compare and contrast. Yeah, that's what all this is about, compare and contrasting. So good morning, Morton. Oh, so let me see here. All right. I was just checking things out. That's what I do. I check things out. So we're starting on comparison and contrast. It is, if you look in week 5, actually you have all of the handouts are in week 4, but I'm going to open up week 5, just kind of let you see what's happening in here. Again, anybody who had issues with yesterday, I was very frustrated. I couldn't go in and put grades on the peer revision documents or the comments where you wrote them because I couldn't get into Blackboard, and I couldn't get back into it until about 8 o'clock last night. And by then I'm feeding the kitten, and it's just like I just got done running, so I was nice and sweaty. It was hot last night, so.
I like the warm evenings.
No, I like it when it's a little cooler. When you're running, it's not so bad. But anyway, you can see we've got a lot coming up. This week, we're going to go over compare and contrast. We're going to look at the topic list. You need to review for subject, verb, pronoun, antecedent agreement. We may be working with student sample essays in the class on Wednesday, or I may have you work as groups and brainstorm some ideas, or show you kind of how to work on figuring out your topics, or how to get the parts of what you need on your topic. You have an outline due on Thursday. Turn an outline of C&C essay on graphic organizer, including subjects. That's one of your documents you're getting. And then you have a grammar quiz on the 1st, which is Friday, right? Yeah. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Okay, so you have something every day, but the grammar quiz, subject, verb, pronoun, antecedent agreement, we are going to try to spend a little time Wednesday talking about that, and particularly about the documents. I need to get you guys copies of it, so let me make a note. Print, SV, because those pages are so wonderful. Only a grammar teacher would, they're really good when you're talking about pronoun antecedent agreement. So the handout for that is very important. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is we're going to look at the one that's a PowerPoint. It looks like it's in an outline form. Yeah, you know, the one that has the ones on the side, and it's 2 or 3 pages long. Sorry.
Really?
Well, it could be worse.
No one does like you.
Okay, but it says writing, comparison, and contrast essay, and, you know, but they're handy because they will help you make a good grade on this, okay? So writing the comparison and contrast essay. And I just love it because I can write on PowerPoints, but I can't write on Word documents. I don't know what I did, but I've messed up the whole thing with that. But basically writing the comparison and contrast. And before I get that, let's stop and think. Do you guys ever, with your friends, say, hey, what do you want to do this weekend? Well, do you want to go to the fair, or you want to go to a movie? So you sit there and you start saying, okay, if we go to the fair, this is what we got to do, and this is what it costs, and then we have to pay for parking. But if we go to a movie, all we have to do is pay to get into the movie, and we can sneak in snacks, okay? What you're doing a lot of times when you're trying to decide what you're going to do is comparing and contrasting. We do it a lot. You know, if you're sitting in the house, what do you want to watch on TV? I don't know, what do you want to watch? Well, what do you want to eat for supper? Well, let's get something from somewhere, and then you go through which one you want to do. And we do it all the time. And particularly now that we've got all these new phones coming out, the iPro 13 and that new Galaxy that flip folds or whatever, yeah, there's a lot of choices. And so we have to think, what do I want to do? You know, do I want this one or that one? And that's when we do compare and contrast. So writing the comparison and contrast essay. So what is the purpose of it? It's to show the differences between two objects or the similarities between two objects. But we're not going to use the terms similarities and differences. We're going to step away from doing that as our kind of organizational motif, okay? But basically what you do is you can show how one subject is superior to the other. Oh, let me remind you, if you did the deep peer revision and want the extra credits, you need to get that to me, okay? So just be sure you get it to me before you leave class, okay? It just hit me, I needed to do that. All right, so, and it demonstrates how two subjects that appear dissimilar are actually very similar. We're going to be doing less of that. We're going to be doing more, dealing with two things and deciding which may be better than the other, which means that comparison and contrast can be judgmental or just informational. So if I were going to compare and contrast the two phones, I'm not going to tell you which one to buy. I'm going to say, here's the information. You need to decide, and I would not use the word you. The customer needs to decide which one better fits their personal needs of the customer, okay? So, how do you prepare to write it? You brainstorm everything you know about two subjects. So, I'm going to show you one of the world's most favorite organizational things. Oh, come on. It's being cranky. Go, document camera. There we go. Please check your PC. Oh, it's not. There we go. All right. So, you guys are going to recognize this. You know what this is? It's a Venn diagram. The whole purpose of a Venn diagram is to compare and contrast. So, this is where you have the similarities or the comparing. And this is out here, that's the contrast. What they don't share. Or what's not exactly alike. That's what the purpose of a Venn diagram is. Okay? But I'm not going to make you do a Venn diagram, okay? I don't have to worry. So you brainstorm everything you know about two subjects. You identify points that are relevant. Remember, that's that middle section, which sometimes needs to be bigger. Thanks. You were looking, so it made me realize I need to switch over to the, you're looking up there and I'm like, wait, that's my finger pointing at the Venn diagram. You establish a dominant idea after looking at those points of similarity and difference, and that's the basis of your essay. And you select those traits to focus on based upon the dominant idea. Most of the time, what you're going to do for me in a compare and contrast essay is you're going to look at the differences. That's what you're going to focus on. Because when we're talking about a phone, well, you talk on it, and you get messages on it, and you take pictures, and you play games. So what's different about them? The cost.
The storage capacity.
Yeah, well, things like that. So you're going to look at what's different. So most of the time, we focus on differences or the contrast. Okay? So, and then be sure these traits are subject to the purpose, the desired accomplishment. You have to make sure that they're relevant to what you're trying to do. It's like if I'm going to buy a car, if I'm going to choose between a Mustang and a Corvette, I'm not going to sit there and talk about, well, they have tires, and they have an engine, and they have a windshield. There's a basic body form, right? They have brakes. I'm not going to focus on those things. I'm going to focus about what's different. Well, the cost of a Mustang versus a Corvette is going to be a big difference, isn't it? And yes.
Can we start off with the sentence basically saying how they're similar yet transition into how they contrast?
We're not, no. Mm-mm. I'm going to show you what we're talking about are the methods of organization. So you're not even going to use those similarities and you're not going to use those terms, okay? Because of the way I want you to write it. Okay, so writing the thesis statement, which is important. So how do you write it? Well, you have to tell the reader has to know what the subjects are, the two things you're going to compare and contrast, all right? I call those subjects, all right? And within what you're talking about, most of you are going to be stressing what their differences are, because you're going to compare two things that are kind of similar, all right? You create a thesis statement that reflects that decision. Most people don't talk about the similarities, they talk about the differences. So, here's some weak statements. So what I want you to do is make sure that on this PowerPoint know that these are not ones to use in your essay. That's a problem. They are both somewhat alike and somewhat different. That's about as vague as, no, that's a no, don't use that, that's why I'm putting the red X on it, okay? I can see some similarities and some differences too. That's the same sentence, isn't it? We don't do that. And both of them involve only a single similarity and no differences, or whatever. But those are weak ones, we don't wanna do weak ones, that's a problem. Okay, so now let's look at some stronger ones. Here are two stronger ones. So, Ralph and Jack have very different leadership styles and motivations, which leads to the eventual chaos and anarchy on the island. Do you guys know what novel that's from? It's from a novel called The Lord of the Flies. Of course, the English teacher has to have an English one in there. But The Lord of the Flies is about a bunch of British schoolboys who are shipwrecked on an island during World War II, and basically how they turn into little monsters and are not very nice. It's like the Hunger Games, but without Panem forcing you to do this stuff, okay? It's just how young people will react. Now the other one, this is the one, put a big star by this one, right here. Because this is a good one that you can modify to fit whatever your topic is, okay? It says, in order to make a decision between the Honda Civic and the BMW, consider the following criteria: price of the vehicle, average mileage, and price of insurance. And when you're talking average mileage, that's miles per gallon. Those are important considerations. Now, just off the top of your head, which one's going to cost more, the Civic or the BMW? BMW is going to cost more. And the more expensive the car is, the more expensive the insurance is going to be. We can go back to the Mustang and the Corvette. Which one's going to cost more? The Corvette. Which one's insurance is going to cost more? All right, so I'm going to talk about who are the average drivers of a Mustang? Teens, 18 to 25. The average driver of a Corvette's going to be that old man who's trying to look young again and attract girls, right? 45, 50, 60. The insurance on a Mustang is more, for that teen driver, is much more expensive than it is on that Corvette, on an average, okay? So there are some differences depending on the cars you choose, all right? So, but this is a good one. Can you see how you could just, you could take almost anything and put it in there. Consider the following criteria: price of the phone, average storage capacity, which is important because we know iPhones have this issue about filling up. I'm on my second year on my phone and it's done okay so far. Watch it be full today because I said that. And then I don't have insurance on my phone, but that are availability of apps. Isn't that what we all want, our apps on our phone that we pay for? I'm stuck with an iPhone because I bought too many apps. You can't transfer apps between types of phones. So see how I could do this for almost any topic though. And that's a lot easier than trying to talk about similarities and the differences. All I'm talking about are these are going to be how they differ when you look at this thesis. So, organizing it, we're going to talk about block or alternating. So block treats all of the elements for each subject separately. So if I'm going to do the BMW and the Honda, I'm going to talk about, the BMW is a great, my topic sentence for the body paragraph would be, the BMW is a great car for someone to purchase. The average cost of a BMW, see how I'm going to go talk about the cost. I taught a couple of things, the average cost, standard, off the line, nothing extra for a BMW is going to be $39,000. If I add any extras in like this and this and this, it's going to take it up between $45,000 and $50,000. So I've spent at least 2 sentences talking about that BMW price. Then I'm going to transition to say, another important consideration for the BMW is what's the average miles per gallon. The average miles per gallon on the road is going to be this, and on the highway is going to be, or in town is going to be this, and on the highway is going to be. See how I'm dealing all with that in one paragraph. Alternating, you focus, block focuses on the subject and then going through the criteria. Alternating focuses on the evaluative item you're looking at, and then talks about the subjects within that paragraph. And we'll see that better in a minute. And if your comparison is a short one, block is okay. If it's longer, it's better to do alternating. Particularly if you're going to do, say you're going to take a test in history, and the professor's going to ask you to talk about the similarities and differences between World War I and World War II. I've used those words, similarities and differences, haven't I? Okay. So you are going to alternate. You're going to say one of the reasons for war is economic reasons. And then so I would say the economies of many countries in Europe were in trouble. In World War I, you talk about that, then you talk about how they were in trouble, then you transition in World War II was slightly different, but they still had issues. You see how you can do that? So it's, alternating is better if you're doing a timed essay, because you cover both subjects. Even though if you might not get through all three criteria, you've at least covered both subjects. If you just do block and you spend all your time writing in that 50-minute midterm exam, and you're only writing about one, you haven't covered the second subject, so you haven't really done the essay. Not too many people, essay tests are not as popular with some professors, so. This is, you have a graphic organizer, you're gonna see that this looks like it. So here's how it looks on the graphic organizer. So we've got, the block method, and you're gonna see up here, what should be right here is the word subject. I'm just gonna abbreviate. Subject is BMW, and then the Honda. So, and this would be second paragraph, and this would be third paragraph, when you're talking on this one. So I have the topic sentence says, the BMW is a great car when someone's choosing to buy one. The average price, so the flow on this one is this way. So my second paragraph first talks about the BMW. I don't even touch it, and it goes backwards on me. No. Oh, it helps if I'm over here. I don't want outline, sorry. There we go. I can't hold the pencil too close to the screen or it'll advance it. Okay, so this is all one paragraph, and I just transition between, I talk about the BMW in the topic sentence. I only say the BMW is a great car if you're thinking about buying one. Then I talk about price, then I go to mileage, then I go to the insurance. Third paragraph, topic sentence says, another excellent choice for a person to buy would be the Honda Civic. And then I talk about the price, the mileage, so it's always going to work this way. So, you're only going to have 4 paragraphs in this essay. The introduction, that ends with that thesis, which you can use the one that they gave you in this particular PowerPoint, except they give you the Honda first and then the BMW. I don't know why they switched it on this. And then a conclusion. All right, so this is what it looks like if you do an outline version of it. So paragraph 1 is going to be the introduction. So I'm going to go paragraph 1. Paragraph 2 is about the BMW. Paragraph 3 is about the Honda. I hate the stuff that I hate it when people do this in a PowerPoint. And paragraph 4 is the conclusion. So it's a 4-paragraph essay. So those are just 2 different ways to visualize it, okay? So you've got the table that I created for you based off of this, or you can do an outline. That table's probably going to be easier. All right, so now we're going to talk about alternating. Come on, fill in there. All right, so here's the difference. You'll notice that it was a horizontal organization for the block, whereas it's vertical for alternating. So the second paragraph focuses on the price. So I'm not going to say, when considering the price of a Honda, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say, when considering purchasing a new car, the overall cost is important. I haven't mentioned the Honda, I haven't mentioned the BMW, okay? I'm going to save those. I will then transition after that sentence, that topic sentence. Your topic sentence only talks about the price. Then I go down, then I talk about the BMW. Then I can say, in alternating, after I finish the price of the BMW is this, I can say, on the other hand, a more reasonably priced alternative is the Honda Civic when it comes to cost. See how I've now done the comparison and contrast right there for you within that paragraph. It's a little easier to see the connection between the two. When you do block, you have to do BMW, price, mileage, insurance, and then when I get to the Honda Civic, I've got to say the Honda Civic is another good choice, but I have to make a point of, in that paragraph about the Honda Civic, saying, unlike the cost of a BMW, a Honda Civic costs this. You see how it's a little bit farther apart, so it doesn't always read like it's the same essay or the same thing going on. So you transition this way. So the topic sentence only talks about the mileage. It only talks about the insurance. That's all that should be in a topic sentence if you're doing alternating. Because what happens is if you try to put the subjects in there, you'll accidentally give me a topic sentence that says, well, the price of the BMW is this much, and then later on you talk about the price of the Honda, so your paragraph has gone off topic. That's why you have to be sure that you focus those topic sentences only on the evaluative criteria. And it's hard coming up with the words for those, I'll be honest, sometimes. So here's what the outline looks like. So again, we've got paragraph 1. It's the same introduction. Paragraph 2 looks slightly different, doesn't it? It talks about price, then BMW, then Honda, mileage, BMW, Honda, paragraph 3. Paragraph 4 is going to be insurance. And then the conclusion is going to be the same. Paragraph 5. So in a way, organizing the alternating method is easier. Because when I'm saying the cost of the Honda is less than the cost of the BMW, they're right next to each other, so it's easier for the reader to see that comparison. That it's actually a contrast. But you're basically comparing them is what you're doing. So, what are the rules of thumb with comparison and contrast essays? Be sure to discuss both subjects equally in terms of coverage. They have to be similar in length. If they're not, you've got a problem. Okay. Be sure to discuss the same elements for each subject. Do not discuss one element for one subject and not for the other. So you can't talk about the cost of the BMW, but not mention the cost of the Honda. You can't talk about the features of the apps available on the iPhone, but not talk about the apps available on the Galaxy, okay? You have to do it. Even if you have to say something like, well, when you're talking about the Mustang and the Corvette, you could talk about the size of the engine, probably. I don't know enough about cars to be doing this. But you can say, well, the Corvette's has this much horsepower, but you can't discuss it. If you skip that in the Mustang, you've heard. The engine on a Mustang, however, is much smaller. The basic horsepower you're going to get is this. I don't know. I'm just showing you that you have to deal with it. You can't, even if you have to say that this really isn't a problem because there are no apps available on a flip phone, right? Okay. There's no, you can't even text message on a flip phone, right? So you have to say that. And decide upon either block or alternating. Do not mix. Sometimes people want to say, they think that here's the block method, I've told you about the BMW and those 3 things, and now I've told you about the Honda Civic, and then they'll give me an extra paragraph in there that says, now their similarities are this. You don't have to tell me what cars' similarities are. They all have engines, they all have wheels, they all have bodies. You don't have to tell me the similarities, because what's important are the differences. Because cars are cars, and phones are phones.
And on that subject of how they differ, you can actually differ the engine by cylinder.
Yeah, see, I don't know. That would be CCs, right? Or something. I don't know. Again, I shouldn't talk about cars because I don't know enough. And have a clear purpose to achieve in the comparison and contrast. All right, so using indicators. You've got to use words sometimes to help the reader know exactly what you're doing, but avoid similarities and differences, okay? So here are some examples for comparing. You can use also, as, in the same way, like, just like the BMW, the Honda Civic has extras that can be added. They don't have moonroofs. Do they call it moonroofs anymore? Are they still moonroofs? Okay, good. That hasn't changed. Similarly, comparable, equally, in addition. The contrast ones are, although you're going to see that a lot of the contrasting are those subordinating or coordinating conjunctions. Even though, however, on the other hand, otherwise, yes, still, see how that looks like a list of those, doesn't it? Be careful with whereas. All right, so that's the PowerPoint. Let's go look at one that looks like a Word document that I created, okay? That's the easiest way to say that. No, I want to discard my annotations. Here we go. All right, so this is basically the chapter shortened down into 2 pages by me a while back. What is it? Comparison and contrast. You're basically showing how 2 or more things are similar or contrast them to show their differences. And really, I think differences is where most people will go. So analogy is a special form by explaining one thing by comparing it to another. One of the ways for humans to make sense of our world is to put data, whichever way you want to say it, side by side. Because comparison and contrast is central to our way of thinking, they show up on exams. This really just goes over that. So watch on an exam to see if they use compare and contrast, similarities and differences, relative merits or advantages and disadvantages. Even when the assignment does not state one of those words, you can tell that that's what they're going to. Uh-oh, what did I do? I flipped over. Okay, sorry. I had to because I went over the styles thing, and it flipped it crazy. Okay. When you evaluate, you frequently use C and C, courses, cars, healthcare options. A basis for comparison must exist between the two items. I cannot sit there and say, I'm gonna compare an orange and a washing machine. What do they have in common?
Nothing.
They're both concrete items. You can touch them. But that's not a basis, and there's no reason to, what value is done by comparing an orange and a washing machine? There isn't any. But if I wanted to compare an orange with an apple, okay, now they're fruits, they provide nutrients. You see how all of a sudden, by picking something that's at least in the same kingdom as the other one, I'm going kingdom, phylum, class, order, family,
You
genus.
can also differ, just on the basis of contrast and nutrition-wise.
Yeah.
Oranges actually provide vitamin A, D, I believe, is
Uh-huh.
what it was, and basically the apples provide vitamin C.
Because you're coming up with more things to compare, whereas I can't do that with the washing machine. So there have to be some similarities, all right?
I took nutrition.
Ooh, I took home ec 1 year. That was it. Okay. The two or more things must have enough in common to justify the comparison. So when two subjects are similar, the differences may be that's what's worth discussing. And I feel like that's what's gonna happen for most of you, depending on what you do. So points for discussion. After deciding, so make sure you treat the subjects same or equally. That's really just a brief, what we've seen. The thesis statement should also let the reader know what you're gonna focus on. Whether you're doing block or alternating, you need to give the subjects, and you need to give what the evaluative criteria is. Those 2 or 3 or 4 things you're gonna evaluate by. Let's see, I'm just skipping that. So here's one. This is a subject by subject comparison, and it's block method, and I'm doing Star Wars and Star Trek. And I'm saying, if you like Star Wars and Star Trek, you can do it. I tended to pick a topic because most kids either don't like science fiction for some reason, I don't know. But, anyway, if you want to write this essay, you could. But you could substitute 2 books, a book and a movie, see how you could do that. So many people think Star Wars and Star Trek are the same story, but comparing and contrasting the 2 series shows how both have different views of the future or past. So, Star Wars, I would look at block method, I would look at Star Wars setting, characters, and conflict. Those are the 3 things I'm going to look at, and how that gives us a different version of the past. If you, remember, it begins with in a galaxy, in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So see how it's in the past. Whereas Star Trek, the setting is the future. You've got characters and you've got conflict, and so you basically restate the thesis. So that's it right there. So if you do point by point, I came up with a slightly different, I gave you the thesis statement that has the criterion at this time. Although Star Trek and Star Wars are both series about humankind and its expansion into outer space, the settings, the characters, and the conflicts show the greater complexity of the Star Wars universe. So I'm actually making an evaluation on this one. So you focus on the setting, Star Trek, Star Wars, the characters, Star Trek, Star Wars, and the conflicts, Star Trek and Star Wars. And that's basically summarizes that, okay? I want to show you a quick video. This is my Canadian friend. He does a decent job. Hold on.
Does he say A after every sentence?
No, he doesn't go A. But he does talk about soda pop. No, he doesn't talk about soda pop. Okay, I'm just going to get it rewound since I just showed it.
One of the most common types of academic essay you'll have to write is the comparison contrast essay, where you'll be asked to talk about the similarities and differences of 2 subjects. Now, it probably won't be as easy as comparing 2 cities. You'll probably have to compare something like 2 theories or 2 characters in 2 totally different novels. The most important thing to remember with comparison is to avoid the obvious. If you have 2 subjects that are very similar, of course, it's easy to focus on similarities, but it's probably more interesting to try to focus on the differences. Now, before we talk about the essay structure, it's important to mention that you should probably watch the video on basic essay structure first, okay? So the comparison contrast essay introduction is basically the same as the other essays we've discussed. The hook will engage the reader, and introduce both subjects, which is very important. The background will give any essential information that the reader needs to understand the main point of the essay. And then the thesis statement will focus the comparison for the reader. Now, I'll mention something about thesis statements in a moment. The main difference between the comparison contrast essay and the other essays that we've discussed is that you have options with this kind of essay. There are really two different options that you can choose from. The first one is what we call the block method, which means you have two body paragraphs that are organized in this fashion. You can have a similarities differences essay,
That's a no.
which means you have one paragraph that is entirely focused on the similarities between these two subjects, and one paragraph that is entirely focused on the differences between the two subjects, making sure that each paragraph has a clear topic sentence. Another form of the block essay is what you might call a subject-to-subject essay, which in one paragraph gives all the information about one subject. In the next paragraph, it focuses entirely on subject B. Okay, so that's one option. The second option, and in my opinion, the slightly more interesting of the two, is what we call the point-by-point comparison contrast essay, where instead of focusing only on similarities and differences, you choose two or more points of comparison. Now, if, for example, you were comparing two restaurants, certain points that you could use to compare them would be atmosphere, menu, service, and so on. So in the point-by-point body, each paragraph focuses on one point, either with the similarities or the differences. So for example, in that essay about restaurants, paragraph 1 would focus entirely on the atmosphere of both restaurants. Paragraph 2 could focus entirely on the service at both of those restaurants and how they are similar or different. After you've done that, of course, you have your conclusion, which is the same as pretty much all essays that we've talked about. You want to summarize your main points, and you want to end with a final statement to leave the reader with a lasting impression, perhaps a final opinion. Now, the most important part to keep in mind about the point-by-point essay is that whatever points you're discussing in your body have to be mentioned in the thesis statement. Now, with the block method, the thesis statement could be slightly more general, but if I were to write an essay about the restaurants and my points were atmosphere and service, I have to make sure to include the words atmosphere and service in my thesis statement. So that's basic comparison contrast essay structure. If you want to practice comparison.
Okay, so you've heard it 3 times now, organization. That's what drives this. But he brought up a possible topic. You can compare 2 restaurants. I don't really want to see a comparison of Chick-fil-A and McDonald's.
Chick-fil-A and Cane's would be better.
Chick-fil-A and Cane's, okay. Because they share something, so you're talking chicken. You know, so do I really want to hear that they have chicken on the menu, or do I want to hear how they what they make differently?
But, by the way, you don't want to do a compare and contrast with Swan chicken to Cane's, Raising Cane's.
I prefer Slim chickens.
I prefer Cane's over any of
I don't like cane sauce, but, you know, I actually like, Chicken Express. I like them, so, because they've got other things, they've got, fried okra, they've got other things on their menu. So sorry about that, started talking about, it's coming up on lunchtime, so I'm getting hungry. So what I want to do right now is, I want to go in and let's talk about some topics. And I'm going to, make a point of saying, you can't do some of these topics, because we're going to do something a little more sophisticated. So, the very first one up here, and this topic list is in that folder that says compare and contrast handouts. But I never copy off the topic list because they're too long. Apple versus Microsoft, or should it be Apple versus IBM? That might be a better way to phrase it. Okay. Okay. Coke versus Pepsi.
That's the oldest tale I can think of.
Well, I don't like Pepsi, so you're gonna have a hard.
Black Coke.
Yeah, or it's just like got too much sugar in it or something. If anybody's taking art appreciation or music appreciation, you could pick a couple of things from that and write that paper and maybe get extra credit in your class. Renaissance art versus Baroque art, because you know if it's not Baroque, don't fix it. Okay, bad joke, right? That's a dad joke, all right. Antebellum era versus Reconstruction era in American history. Well, antebellum is before the Civil War, Reconstruction's after. So, which is why Lady A, the country band, changed, they don't call themselves Lady Antebellum anymore because it's a negative connotation. Childhood versus adulthood. This is interesting. I get a lot of students who want to write on this, but I'm sorry, if you're 17 years old or 16, it's really hard to write about adulthood. You're still in childhood, you know? So you have to be careful on that. And look what's right there, number 6, Star Wars versus Star Trek. If you know anything about it, write it. Just understand that I know about those, okay?
Do you understand about Marvel versus DC?
You can do Marvel versus DC also. Yes, that's a possibility. It's okay. You can do you see how? But you could take the same character, Marvel versus DC. You talk about the heroes versus the villains versus the setting or the conflict. So see, you can do it. It's very easy. And I don't have any problems with you writing about comic books. Hey, at least you're looking at a comic book. Hopefully you're reading occasionally, right?
I actually read a lot of
Yeah.
those.
My brother used to accuse me when I was young of not reading, just looking at the pictures, because I could read them so fast. Biology versus chemistry. Who wants to write that one? Yeah, nobody. All right. Astrology versus astronomy. I had somebody try to write this. They really need to know more about astrology. They need to know more about astronomy also, but you could do it. The American government versus, and ignore the numbering system, guys. That is, I just found lists and I copied them into one document is what I did.
By the way, if anyone wants a hint on biology versus chemistry, it's
Uh-huh.
like, chemistry deals more with the chemical structure of atomic matter.
Okay.
Biology deals more with environments and more so living things.
Okay.
So, chemistry, small things. Biology.
Big things. Okay. So American government versus British government or any government. You'd have to know about it. You'd have to have studied it. Most of us have a semi-clear idea about what's going on with the American government. Not that great, right? Fruits versus vegetables. That's highlighted in yellow. That's a no. That's a no. We cannot do fruits versus vegetables.
Please don't.
Yeah.
We're gonna get so many people that argue about the tomato.
It's a fruit. Ego versus superego. I have had a student who was in a psychology class write this paper. But if you're not really clear on the difference between the ego and the superego, it's a little bit harder to do. You could do Christianity versus Judaism or any world religion, because what's going to happen is most frequently in this class, if anybody's been exposed to religion, it's Christianity. So if you're going to do Judaism, you have to go look it up. If you're going to do Islam, you still have to do the same thing. You know, you've got to have some background. You can't compare and contrast things unless you have knowledge about them.
I got sent to the office because we did that in school, and I was just joking around, and I said praise Allah, and my teacher immediately kicked me out.
That's because you're from a small school, that's why. Yeah. Okay. Republican versus Democrat. I am so tired of politics. Having lived through the presidential election last year, I think they're all crooks. I think most of them are semi-competent. No, it's just semi. I'm not, okay. Monarchy versus presidency. Again, you'd have to know. U.S. President versus UK Prime Minister. Jazz versus classical music, music appreciation. You'd have to be doing something with that. Hey, soccer versus football. Most of us could write that essay, couldn't we?
Yeah.
Because soccer, I didn't even know soccer was a sport when I was a kid. It wasn't out there. We had American football. We didn't care what they did in Europe, what they did anywhere but in the U.S. It had to be NFL or college football. That was about it. But, you know, and people tend to look at the equipment, the field. No, you don't need to write about the field. Come on, you're playing on grass, not that big a deal. But the rules, and maybe, if you try to write about the players, it's a little bit harder because, because of part of the equipment that's worn. Whereas if you talk about maybe just basic gameplay. New England colonies versus the middle colonies or versus the southern colonies. I don't know. Cash versus credit cards. That's a good topic. A lot of people like that one. because the more credit cards you have, the more credit card debt you're gonna end up with, I'll just tell you, okay? Sam Gamgee versus Frodo Baggins, that's from The Lord of the Rings, okay? By the way, my daughter's middle name is Arwen, named after one of the characters from The Lord of the Rings, so, and she's almost 40 years old, so I read The Lord of the Rings when I was in, like, the 6th grade, so.
Who did 14 through 16?
There's actually a list out there, but stop, if you know anything about The Lord of the Rings, you can do it. Or you could, if you wanted to compare the book with the movies, good luck, because that's gonna be like a 30-page paper, okay? Be careful. But Gandalf versus Dumbledore, most of you know Dumbledore is the headmaster at Hogwarts up until at the end of book 6, he's gone, okay? Well, he's still there. And Gandalf is the wizard out of The Lord of the Rings, okay? But
Some people think the guy from Lord of the Rings is pretty much the same as Dumbledore.
I know, but they're wrong, they're different, trust me.
I know.
All right, Fred versus Shaggy, okay, Scooby-Doo. That's for those of you who aren't into sci-fi or fantasy, okay? Rap versus pop. You can do other forms of music, rap versus pop. But so you might look at, and there's crossovers, I realize that. There's people who do both. We've got rapping happening in country and western music now, and but you don't try to deal with things that are both. Try to deal with things that are clearly in one or the other. It would be like comparing Eminem with George Strait. See how there's a lot of differences between the two of them, right? But they're both singers, kind of. Okay. Articles of Confederation versus the U.S. Constitution. King Henry VIII versus King Louis XIV. Both are dead. That's much we know. This one had his head cut off. This one had 8 wives. Both monarchs. Stocks versus bonds. I got a decent paper on that from somebody who was studying accounting or economy or something along those lines. And it was probably a tech student taking, English from us because it's cheaper. And, but it's not a bad one. You could do communism versus capitalism, but you have to be taking government, so you need to know what you're talking about. Socialism versus capitalism. Nuclear power versus solar power. Wind power versus solar power, okay? Alternative, so, mammals versus reptiles, look at that. That's been yellowed out. You can't do mammals versus reptiles. Man versus dinosaurs, you would just be retelling Jurassic Park, okay? Don't do that. Oven versus microwave.
So, what if we change the species?
Oven versus microwave. One of the worst papers I ever got was oven versus microwave. I had one of my high school kids tried to write this paper but had not paid any attention to any of the organization, and it just wandered all over the place. So you got to be careful. Greek versus Roman mythology. Got a paper on that this summer. And actually, I'm rereading Rick Riordan's second series where he has the Greek demigods and the Roman demigods having to work together to defeat Mother Earth, okay? Greek versus Roman mythology, possibility. Chinese versus Japanese. What are you going to talk about? There's some subtle, they all look alike to us, and that's horrible to say, but isn't it true? It's very difficult to see the differences. They're very subtle, but they're aware of them because they see that all the time. It's like when you look at, all white people look alike, all brown people look alike, no, people don't all look alike, but it's got to be more than, you can't just talk about physical differences. What?
Just on the basis of that, there is actually a tribe, there was a political movement back in, I believe it was Africa or somewhere in that region of Africa. But basically there was a political war between a darker shade of what? Skin color, yeah. Pretty much.
Okay. I kind of like the notion of comedy versus drama. I'm a comedy person. I have never seen a complete Nicholas Sparks movie. I've not read any of his books. They're all want to make you cry. Everybody's someone going to die, and they're not going to get together. I'm just not mine. But you could do that. Or, romance versus drama. Well, romance is drama. Comedy versus romance. Renting versus owning. That's a pretty good paper to write. And I tend to get it from older students who are trying to consider renting versus owning. Mozart versus Beethoven. Music appreciation. A lot of you have experienced online versus traditional education because we all got sent home March of 2020, didn't we?
Yes.
So you had to do online versus traditional education. This is considered face-to-face, just because you can see my face and I can kind of see your faces, all right? But it's actually a hybrid course. And it's not, or any of you, do any of you have flex for your other classes here? There are some instructors that you only go one day a week, and the other day, you're either reading something or you have to participate. I don't do that. I'm fortunate that I've got the ITV. North versus South Pole, yeah, that's probably not gonna be a good one, I'll just tell you. They have snow and ice. The animals are different. Sometimes the climate's a little bit different. Watercolor versus oil, ooh, you need to know your mediums for creating ours. 1984 versus Fahrenheit 451. I know in Fahrenheit 451, they burn all the books, so people actually memorize the books so that knowledge is not lost. 1984, well, what he thought the world was going to be like 60, 70 years when he wrote it. I know you're all going to go for Emily Dickinson versus Samuel Taylor Coleridge. That would be an American poet versus a British poet. Yeah, we all love poetry, don't we? W.E. Du Bois versus Booker T. Washington. I've gotten airplanes versus helicopters. Hitler versus Napoleon. That one's not bad, writing about two different dictators. Roman Empire versus British Empire. Paper versus plastic. Italy versus Spain sounds like a soccer match. I like this one, Jefferson versus Adams, or Hamilton versus Burr, and we already know Burr won. Come on, you guys should know Hamilton. Thoroughbreds versus Clydesdales. There's always that horse person out there who wants to write this. Or they pick Arabians versus whatever.
Calvin.
What?
Arabian versus Calvin.
Yeah. So, let's see, spiders versus scorpions sounds like you're doing West Side Story to me. Jets versus sharks. That comes out, the new version of it. Northern Hemisphere versus Southern Hemisphere. There are a lot of things you can talk about. But you have to talk about weather, because it's different. I don't know, that might be too big. You have to have done LD to know Hobbes versus Locke, so that's probably not going to be a choice for anybody. Friends versus family, be careful. Don't make them sound like exact same thing. If you look at how they're similar, well, yeah, they're always there for you. How are they different? Well, you don't sleep in the same house as your friends. Yeah, but you do sometimes, yeah. So that might be a harder topic than you think. Modern dance versus ballroom dancing. American Idol versus The Voice. It's good that American Idol's back on. But you might want to do, maybe you'd want to do The Voice versus The Masked Singer, because they're both singing competitions, but they focus on different things. The whole point of the competition is different. Not to create a new star. The Masked Singer is about trying to figure out, who's the best person singing behind a mask, right? Reality, huh?
Family Feud.
Family Feud? For what?
Versus another show.
Well, that would be game shows versus, here's how it says reality TV versus sitcoms. You could do game shows versus reality. Because that's a little more similar, though. Picard versus Kirk. William Shatner is going to be an astronaut. He's going to fly in space on one of the non-governmental things. 90 years old. Awesome. Books versus movies. We can do that one. Books take longer to read, but you get a lot more detail. Okay. Magazines versus comic book. Email versus letters. By the way, coffee versus an energy drink. Your sample essay is that paper. It's about coffee versus an energy drink. Profit versus nonprofit. High school versus college. I'm sorry. Kids at the high schools, you're not in college. You're still sitting in high school. This is still focused on high school. College is different. If you don't come, all I do is count your absent. You miss out on instruction. But if enough absences, I will drop your little butt out of my class. I'll just tell you, okay? Chamberlain versus Churchill. We can do offense versus defense. What sport? 33. Jordan versus Bryant, or any two comparable athletes. You cannot compare Michael Jordan versus Patrick Mahomes. They're not operating in the same athletic realm. But you could do Mahomes versus Brady.
I don't know much about basketball, but can someone explain the similarity or difference here?
Between Bryant and Jordan? Yeah, there's a lot. You're looking at most valuable players, championships on the teams you were on, overall statistics. You have to know something about that, okay? So if you're not into it, ignore that. Or you could do the Cowboys versus the Giants.
Dear God, don't
Could you do like the difference between college basketball? with
You compare,
professional
contrast college,
College and professional?
yes, you could do that, very easily. Because I don't like professional basketball.
Yeah, professional basketball is just running around basketball and shooting.
Yeah,
College is more
they don't
structured.
call traveling, and they travel all the time. I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. I used to love professional basketball back in the 70s and 80s, but, you know. Harry versus Draco, come
That's
on.
You're gonna make many Harry Potter fans swoon.
Yeah, yeah, the problem, nobody's ever written that paper, by the way. Poetry versus prose, I've never gotten that paper, because nobody wants to write about poetry. Poetry sucks because it's hard to understand, right? That's what I hear. Fiction versus nonfiction, hey, vampires versus werewolves.
Twilight.
No, you cannot talk about Twilight. I'm sorry, I'm so glad that Twilight is not popular like it used to be. It's on all TV all the time. But you've got to, you can't, if you want to talk about Twilight vampires versus traditional vampires, you could write that essay. But you can't use Twilight vampires and Twilight werewolves because they don't follow any of the traditional rules. Go watch Van Helsing. See what I'm, Van Helsing's more accurate. Having read Bram Stoker's Dracula, all right, I'm just telling you. But if you want to do monsters, it's okay. And who would win? Well, we already know. Van Helsing wins, no. Summer versus winter or any other seasons. That's not a bad paper. What do you have in summer? What do you have in winter? Recycling versus landfill. Motorcycle versus bicycle. Newton versus Einstein. Okay. All right, so that's enough, but those lists are in there. So, and you don't have to tell me, you don't have to say, oh, this wasn't on the list, can I do that? If you
Your conference is scheduled to end in 2 minutes.
Please send me a course message and ask me if it's going to be successful. Because I can tell you, I can have an idea, just because I've lived so long, I've got a lot of knowledge in strange areas. But if you put in 2 topics, I'm going to go, I just don't think you've got enough, there's not enough information. I can tell you that, okay? So we're gonna talk about, we'll review over subject, verb, pronoun, antecedent agreement. I will make sure those papers get sent out to facilitators to copy for everybody. I'm gonna do that right now, since I haven't done it. And, I will have it for you, so we will probably go over, have access to your textbook on Wednesday. So bring a laptop or something, because I'm gonna have you work on stuff in there, okay? Course resources is where grammar is.
I dealt with someone that actually got into the Twilight series for a while.
Well, I'm sorry, I thought the book where there's just blank pages, she didn't write anything because she was so dadgum depressed, it drove me crazy. Subject verb, there it is. Download it. Oops, there's another email. Okay. Okay, I can get rid of those, I don't need those. All right.
So yeah, majority of the ideas that you basically threw out to everyone, I kind of know just bits and pieces of what could be a topic.
Well, and that's why you need to stop and create a list if nothing else, or do the Venn diagram, okay? We've got to figure out what we're gonna deal with.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Your conference is now over. Goodbye.
I have a gas on me, because I miscalculated how much
Uh-oh.
I've been driving around.
Uh-oh. Let's see, I have to go through. Crosbyton, Lorenzo, and Gina. I have to stop and think of who my people are. Crosbyton, Abernathy, Brenda.
I gotta go get paperwork from the facility.
Okay, good. So I'm glad you took my advice on that, to get it in for Matt, okay? That's the reason. Okay? Okay, wait, I have.
Well, I will see you guys Wednesday night, and I will see you Wednesday.
Okay, get that narrative in. Okay, I gotta have that. Erin and Amy. Oh, Amy.
Do you need it for like 3 different weeks, or do you need it for just the one?
What, I need, the final narrative was due last night, so you need to get it in. And you've got today to get it in and not have it counted late. Okay? All right.